fourth area of what we consider the new move of modern missions, the fourth wave, is the aspect of using innovative technologies. Remember, technology is one of those 5 factors in missionary advance, and using innovative, modern, incredible technologies is a huge part of the fourth wave. In past time periods, the Industrial Revolution was a big part of ships and boats and engines and stuff like that. But in our day, add to that the information revolution has actually given us tools that make the world reachable as never, ever, ever before. We've talked in previous segments about what allows children to be involved in missions today or in missional outreach. Why all of a sudden, after 1960 years, did youth or kids get involved in world evangelism? How and why were they able to go to all the nations of the earth and share their faith? Well, there's primarily 2 reasons for it that relate to technology. One was the invention of plane travel. We've only been flying on airplanes commercially, since 1950. Prior to that, it was very difficult to go into all the world, especially certain places. Not impossible, but extremely difficult. Once the era of plane invention took place, of course, we could go anywhere quickly, and even parents could put their children on airplanes to go quickly to other places. And that's what happened in the 1960s. Many of the youth groups, they not only went to Mexico, they went all over the globe because it could be done without a 6-month trip in a boat where half the people died on the way. They could step onto an airplane and go and share their faith. And the other thing that allowed that to take place was modern medicine. Modern medicine. Because for thousands of years, it was very dangerous to be a missionary, which is why many parents left their children behind when they went out into missions. Because number one, they didn't want them to die on the way, and number 2, they didn't want their heads to be chopped off in some savage place. And 3, they didn't want them to die of disease. And that was the huge problem in missions for hundreds of years. I mean, so many waves of missionaries would die because they just encountered diseases and all kinds of things they had no antibodies against. We live in the first time period in history where you can take a shot, you can take pills for cholera, for yellow fever, for diphtheria, for polio, for all those kinds of things. And that's what's allowed especially young people to get involved. And I've been involved in taking many youth trips around the world, and all we had to do was give them shots, have them take pills. In fact, whenever I travel with a little pink pill. It's called Pepto-Bismol. And it's a very simple thing. But Pepto-Bismol taken twice a day is known to kill 80% of all stomach-borne diseases. Missionaries used to die by the droves of dysentery and bad food and food poisoning and all kinds of things. And of course, in the age of no antibiotics, people died. So just this wonderful time period in which we live, in which we can be pretty much protected against those things, and we can get on airplanes, and in 12 hours or 18 hours or at the most 24 hours, you can be any place on the world, has allowed millions of children and youth to go forth, as well as adults, and how that's changed our ability, again, to reach the globe and reach it quickly. The other aspects of technology include radio, for example. That's kind of an old technology now, but radio is used right now to beam, especially groups like Trans World Radio beaming into the Muslim nations and Far East Broadcasting into Asia. Many closed nations where you can't openly share the gospel, radio has been used tremendously, especially among Muslims, to share the Jesus story and bring them to faith. And then, of course, there's television. I mean, television only really became big time, 1950. And I remember in my lifetime seeing color on the screen for the first time in 1960, when The Wizard of Oz went from black to color. And how incredible that was. Now, that just seems so normal today, but remember, this is all the last 60 years. If you lived in any other time period prior to that for thousands of years, none of that existed. And all these things have become tools, Film is a part of this as well. Movies being produced. The Jesus movie has been seen by billions of people. I've been in a number of nations around the world where it's the most translated of all movies. And there's been others, of course, that have been made from the Bible. And God just used that aspect of technology tremendously to share the gospel message. Let alone the aspect of computers. I remember when the first computer, I bought my first computer in 1983. And it was this big clunky box with these little floppy drives that were like paper thin and almost no memory, and it cost $3,000 in 1983. Today, we have these little chips and all kinds of little machines and computers. And I remember one time sitting at an airport, I was in Hong Kong, with a little laptop computer on my lap. First of all, I was just kind of staggered by the fact that there was no wires connected to this thing. But I just opened it up, and I started chatting with a pastor friend who lived in the United States for free. I then noticed there was a girl online that I had just witnessed to in a park in China, and she was using a Chinese-English translation to talk to me. I also noticed a friend of mine in Mongolia was online, so I started chatting with her. Here I am sitting at an airport with a little box via the wonders of Wi-Fi, something unheard of 20 years ago. And for free. I remember when you used to take a letter, in my lifetime, 6 weeks to go someplace. Or I remember making one phone call one time from South Africa to America that cost $150 in 1975. I'm sitting in the Hong Kong airport with a little box and no wires, and I'm having 3 international conversations for free. Let alone, we have now cell phones, which has really become the technology of choice. Over almost 7 billion in the world today. And of course the internet, which is kind of the connection of them all. So bottom line here is that, and I have a lot of stories about this in my book. In today's world, God is going to show us how to use all those things, not to just entertain ourselves, and certainly not to look at pornography, or just frivolize away our life. Again, tools are tools. They can be used for evil, or they can be used for good. Why do we have the internet? Why do we have films? Why do we have all these wonderful things God's given to us, if not to communicate the love of God with a world that needs it so desperately? So it becomes a matter in the personal application part of just using the technology at our fingertips, not for me and not to entertain, but to reach others with the love of God. And I have many stories in the book about friends of mine who have websites and who've started chat room groups and forums, or who even use their cell phones to have friends in various nations. I get a call regularly from a friend of mine in Liberia. Cost him nothing. He just calls me up from Liberia and we chat, and we want to develop friendships around the world. We can use all these things to share the love of God. And I believe in this area, it's important to realize, to whom much is given, much is required. We have been given an arsenal of things to use, from airplanes to medicine to all these wonders of the ability to communicate that, again, would have been totally unheard of in other generations. They couldn't even fathom it, let alone them fathoming cars and trains and stuff like that. To whom much has been given, much is required. Are we going to use those things just for our own personal comfort and wealth and means, or are we going to take those things and say, Lord, we want to use them for the glory of God?